Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. In this series, we're aiming to help business owners, business leaders, and fellow coaches by sharing our experience and the experience of our guests who've coached people all around the world in all of different sectors and industries that you can imagine. So, very little more to say other than do please now sit back, relax, and enjoy this edition, and look out for a special offer for our loyal audience at the end of the programme. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Today, I'm joined by Darryl Cooke, and we're going to talk about legal industry disruption, because that's what he's been doing. He's been leading a massive change to the legal industry. Darryl, welcome to the Coaching Conversation, and perhaps you could share your story of how you've got to where you are in the legal industry today.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Thank you for inviting me. I'd be delighted. So by background, I have been a corporate lawyer, a private equity lawyer for as long as I can remember, basically. I have worked probably for 4 or 5 of the top 20 or so law firms, written a number of books on private equity, and I guess to all intents and purposes would be seen both within and outside the industry as quite successful in what I've done. But I think I began to realize that the way the large commercial corporate lawyers set themselves up is just not conducive, not consistent with having a good life, with having a good family life, etc., etc. And I think once you're in, it's very, very hard to get out of. So the whole model, as I think a lot of people know, is totally driven by the hourly charge that the lawyer makes. What that does, it drives the organization so that you end up doing an incredible number of hours, you end up working through the night, etc., etc. But I think what's even sadder about it is that is the metric by which the top 50 or so law firms compare themselves. So the American lawyer in 1985 started to publish the metric of profits per partner. And every managing partner, that's the only metric that's important to them, is what are their profits per partner? Have they gone up from last year? Because that means they can attract better lawyers, they can retain the lawyers they've got, etc., etc. And it came home to me, I think, when I was on the board of a top 10 law firm, and the discussion was on profits per partner. So it was really interesting, Graham. I remember going to this discussion, and everything they brought one of the top 4 accountancy practices in to explain or to talk about how they could push the profits per partner up. And the only discussion was about the number of partners they got rid of. So if they got rid of 20 partners, they'd push the profits up there. And if they got rid of 40, they'd push them even higher. There was no discussion about quality of service. There was no discussion about business development. There's no discussion about new products. It was just simply, if we get rid of some partners, we all work a bit harder, we'll all earn a bit more money. And I think that was the time for me when I realized, actually, they've just got this wrong. I went away, started to talk to clients, started to think about it. It wasn't easy. I think, what did Henry Ford say? If you'd have asked the customer, would he just had faster horses? It wasn't that easy. My father at the time had cancer. He was in a hospice. I talked to him at length about it. His nickname was Gunner, by the way, which is where the Gunner in Gunnercooke came from. And we talked about it at length. And I remember him saying, he said, well, either you've got to leave if you're so frustrated, leave and go and do something else, or you've got to change it. And that was the start. I think when he said you've got to change it, I began to think seriously, how can we change it?
And so when you describe the models as being driven by hourly charges, driven by profits per partner, and a very mercenary perspective on that from the top down, when you reinvented the new model? What was different?
It is really interesting, actually. It's a really good question because the only difference is the way we remunerate the lawyers. And it sounds very simple, but actually the knock-on effect of the way we do it is phenomenal. So lawyers don't get a monthly paycheck like us. They get a percentage of the revenues that they generate. There's a vast internal market where they generate work from each other as well as developing clients outside, but they take a percentage of that. Now, and that is the only difference. But what it does, if you can imagine, it completely changes everything that happens. Because first and foremost, they have amazing flexibility and freedom. So we don't say to them, you've got to do so many hours, or you've got to do this, or you've got to do that. They write their own business plans, and we help them with this particular operating model which we operate to kind of drive their own ambitions. But they make those decisions. So if they want to take Friday off, they take Friday off. If they want to take 6 weeks off in the summer, they take 6 weeks off in the summer. If they want to work till they're 90, they work till they're 90. I spoke to one lawyer yesterday who tells me that ever since every week since he's joined, he picks his little girl up, I think it's at 3:30, and takes her for afternoon tea on Thursdays. They suddenly have that freedom to work and operate how they want. Now, that is wonderful, that freedom. That means we measure the happiness of our lawyers on a regular basis, and they're incredibly happy just because of that freedom. But also, if you think about it, it also drives their ambition and their passion because they become more passionate about the business because it's their business. And so we kind of always say, look, when you join us, you're not a lawyer anymore. You're a lawyer and a business person. So what it also creates is we create this amazing infrastructure around them to give them all the supports that they need to be successful as well as happy. Really interesting, actually, Graham, is coaching is such an important part of that. So we give them coaches before they join. We have coaches before they join and they continue with us. In fact, I mean, it's interesting, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I would encourage people to watch this if you don't mind, Graham, but I interviewed on a podcast a guy called John Amici, who is a English basketball player who went out to the US, became the most successful English basketball player there, became a psychologist and has a coaching practice now. And I asked him about coaching, and he said, "You'd be an idiot not to have coaching." He said you would be an idiot not to have coaching. Why wouldn't you have someone who's on your side who's supporting you? It's just the obvious thing to do. And we take that literally. So when people join us, they're not a lawyer anymore. They're building businesses. So we think they really need coaches, and we introduce them at a very early stage into that idea of someone on their side working with them.
Can I ask some detailed questions about the arrangement? So, are your lawyers employees of Gunnercooke, or are they franchisees, or how does it work?
They are. It is a very good question. Because actually when we started, one of the challenges when we started was trying to convince people of this new model, and everybody wanted to have a share of the partnership at the top, of the model at the top, and that's the model that provides. There's 100+ people working out now that provides all the services that they need. But people just in the mindset, that's what they'd always had. They want to do that, and we used to say, no, no. You're not. That's where we provide the services. You have 100% equity in your own business. So you set up your own business, and we introduce them to accountant right at the outset who will set everything up for them, make it all work very smoothly and how they do that, give them some training on that, etc. But they have 100% equity in their own business, and they then pay us a service fee in effect from those services.
Is this similar to a set of barristers who work a bit like a cooperative in that form?
That is exactly where the idea came. I started off at the bar I worked at the bar for 3 or 4 years. Came exactly from that. It is very different though and so barristers do work like that, but barristers don't work in teams. Solicitors in particular work in teams. And we knew to be successful, we had to create teamwork. So there's a lot of things that we do very, barristers typically will argue over, whether they should buy a particular book in their library because some of them don't use it, etc. Everything that we do, it revolves around developing teams. So that's where the difference is. But the model was absolutely based on that.
So if I were to be in the team and I've got my own business, but I'm trading as Gunnercooke effectively, where does the business development come from? Does it come from the center? Does it come from the individuals? How does that work?
Well, it comes from both in effect. So, some lawyers come in and don't do any business development. We have now, there's 1,000 people within the business now. So there's
Wow.
a very strong internal marketplace, and we run 100 and I think it's about 175 events a year. So some people just go to those events, and that's the business development. It's very internal, and they get work from each other. Some people, it's just natural. They love to business development. They love being rainmakers. And so we'll give them all the support that they need and encourage them in that regard. And we also, our coaches are very early on, are very focused on helping business development when they start. So somebody is bringing their clients across and helping them to establish the new practice. So everyone gets that particular business development support at the outset, and then it's up to them where they want to take the business. Some are just, as you can imagine, incredibly ambitious. And we support that. And some people are very happy to stay where they are as long as, I mean, I think something like 85% of people who apply to us now don't get into the organization. And we're a very values-driven organization. We're very conscious about the culture that we're creating. So we look very carefully at it. But once they're in, it's up to them. They set their own targets. We don't set any targets for them.
In terms of the future generations, how do student solicitors or trainees, paralegals, how do they feature in this setup?
I think that's a really great question, and really relevant at the moment, particularly because of AI and what's happening. AI plays, it plays into our hands a little bit because we have a very kind of, we work what we call on the Gunnercooke prism, where you'll start off at the bottom, giving technical support and advice. You move through the prism, so you become a trusted advisor or personal advisor, even above that. They really benefit from the use of AI, and we're investing really heavily in that to give them that support and that use. But we're really conscious, and we're having a lot of conversations at the moment. What is our role in the industry? How do we help young people to come in? And how do we, with a lot of the things, for instance, we're working with a lot of our younger lawyers to give them MBAs and other things to help to develop them much quicker as trusted advisors and things like that. The very big firms are definitely struggling with AI coming in because they've got so many young lawyers in and so many young lawyers wanting to come from universities to join them. It is a
Yeah.
real challenge.
I can see AI is a challenge to the whole
Yeah.
legal services industry, full stop. It's, the challenge isn't any more difficult than how do you add value beyond the forms? How do you give something that AI can't give?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
it's clearly it's evolving, clearly, but it will be something which the successful law firms will master and others will fail, I guess.
But I think, I do think most chief executives and businesses will always still want to talk to a trusted advisor, someone like us to do. So the challenge will be how do you develop young people where the work that they're doing isn't as necessary as it has been. So I think that training and bringing lawyers through, and there's so many lawyers coming through college and university. They need to look and stop and say, well, where are they heading, these lawyers? What are they going to do with them?
Interesting. So if I was a customer, a client, and I'm used to dealing with a traditional law firm, and I take private equity as an example. If I went to a firm with a transaction in mind, they might field a whole raft of different experts, whether it's property, contractual, whatever. and I would get access to, or I'd be serviced by what is a collective. How does that work within Gunnercooke?
It's just the same. The teamwork is probably stronger. I think when we first started, it was harder because we just didn't have the numbers. But now we've got 700 lawyers or something. So there isn't a discipline that we can't provide expertise on. So it's about putting those teams together. So it starts traditionally with someone, what we call a source partner who is responsible for bringing the work in. We do a lot of training with those source, but we really focus on service training. I mean, a lot of people will say, a lot of clients will say that, lawyers give a good, strong technical service. Actually, what differentiates the good lawyers, in my view, is the really good service that they give. We completely focus on NPS as a measure, and our score is rarely below 95. I think it's about 97 this month, which
Just,
is
just for the audience, NPS is Net Promoter Score. Yeah.
net promoter score, and it goes from -100 to +100. The industry average, I think the last I saw was about 19 or something. Ours is world class is supposed to be above 80. I was running roughly about 95. So we really focus on the service, and because we've got lawyers who are really, they're only as good as their last client. So they're really focused on giving a good service, and we give all the support and training around that. So inevitably as well, we work on how do we put teams together so they can go into the internal market and they will choose the best lawyers that they think for the work that they want to do. They obviously get their favorite lawyers, but sometimes it might be on price. It can be on different things, but they can go and choose that, and then they put that team together. And we do lots of training to help them to develop their teams and support. And then a lot of lawyers, the very ambitious lawyers, develop their own teams. There's quite a lot of groups now that will have 8 or 10 lawyers within their own group.
And from a quality control point of view, what does the centre of Gunnercooke do to maintain quality? Or is it something that self-regulates?
Well, as I say, we're very cautious about people we recruit. It always starts with recruitment. We don't just recruit. We turn down lawyers with very high revenues because we don't think they will fit the organization. So we're very careful about that. We have a very strong coaching model when people come in. We use what's called a vision traction organizer, which is we don't use business plans. We think business plans are a bit of a waste of time in how lawyers operate them. So we have a particular kind of 2-page plan. What are the values? Where do they want to be in 10 years, 3 years? What's the proven process? Lots of different things within that. So very early on, we take a very careful look at how they operate and then introduce coaches to try to help them. We then do NPS on a monthly basis. So we go out on a monthly basis to check NPS. If anybody has a low score, a couple of times we will then sit down and work with them. We have a client excellence team that's constantly going around working with different partners, doing audits, trying to help them and check on them, etc., etc. So we're doing all that's our job. That is the job, or that is our job, is producing this great infrastructure around them, but to help the lawyers. What do they want to do? Help them to have good lives, and help them to improve their revenue. 95% of our lawyers will have higher revenues than they would have had in the previous organization.
Do they all work from home? Is that the model as well?
Absolutely. They work where they want. So we now have 16 offices. Our aim is to be a top 50 global law firm. So we're growing globally quite quickly. We have really beautiful offices wherever we are. It's important to have beautiful offices, but they're not large offices. They are beautiful with really quality meetings, etc. And if you go into them, you'll find some lawyers go in every day. That's what they want to do. Most will work from home or close to home, and will use the offices for meetings, etc.
So the client faces through the um, official offices and the meeting rooms, but the actual legwork would be done largely at home or off-site.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And you said you got 16 offices and you said globally. So what is the reach at the moment?
So we've got a number of offices in the UK. We're in a number of offices in Germany, in the DACH regions of Switzerland, and Austria, and we've now got two offices in the US, in New York and Chicago, and we're now developing a part company, part franchise model. So the part company model means that there'll be certain places where we'll go, where we'll take our model there. But in some other areas where we don't think they will need as many lawyers, we'll probably develop a franchise model. That's happening as we speak.
Right, I understand. And do you find that individual lawyers themselves start to employ their own teams, support functions, administrative, paralegals, whatever?
In specific disciplines, people will definitely do that and develop that support. And that's, as I say, you can see every year the lawyers are getting more and more ambitious in doing that. In some of the areas like corporate, for instance, they might have a small group of corporate lawyers, but because they will use lots of other lawyers around the firm, IP lawyers, real estate lawyers, banking lawyers, so they wouldn't necessarily recruit within those teams. They'll just have a group of corporate lawyers who are coordinating the use of other lawyers.
And how is fee setting controlled? Because obviously these are independent individuals. When you're first engaging with a client and the client says, I want a fixed fee for this transaction or whatever, how does that work in terms of cutting the pie up?
It's a good question. We have a value in the business that we call nudge. So we say nudge is really about putting fruit at high level, but not banning junk food. So we don't tell our lawyers what they have to price. So in a traditional firm, it's set
Yeah,
centrally,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
etc. So it's down to the lawyers to do that. So what that means is quite often we have to really build their confidence, because quite easily, sometimes they can come in, take the charge out rate that they did at a previous firm, and 3 or 4 years later not have moved it up because they may not have the confidence to do it. So we do have pricing consultants within the firm that advise them on lots of training on a one-to-one basis. I think the main thing is about building confidence, so that if they're getting very good NPS scores, etc., the firm wins lots of awards. I think we've won over 100 awards. So that as we build that positioning of the firm, we also want the lawyers to build their confidence. So we try really hard to help them to build their confidence, but it is down to them. We wouldn't seek to tell them what they have to charge.
Okay. And if I turn this as a different way and look at it from an entirely client perspective, if I engage with you and one of the assurances of using a large firm is that if it goes wrong, you've got somebody to sue. How would that work if you got into a dispute with a client? Who would they be suing? What would the dispute be with?
Well, we can't operate unless we carry proper professional indemnity insurance. So that's why lawyers come in. So we have very significant professional indemnity insurance, which we negotiate every year. That protects the client in exactly the same way as it would in a traditional firm. It's absolutely no different at all.
So as a client, I'm engaging with whatever the
You,
legal entity, Gunnercooke, and
you
then
sue.
Gunnercooke is engaging its subcontractors to do the work.
Yeah, yeah. And part of the fee that they pay to us is for us to get proper
Yeah,
insurance.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Understand that. And if you look forward on this model, which, as you say, is very similar to the way barristers work, but adapted for solicitors, do you see other professional services firms, accountants, for example, could they operate? Should they operate in something similar?
I think it's a great model. Obviously, I do. I think there's definitely space within the legal system for. I think the traditional model will continue, but I think having this alternative is really good for the legal practice. We have now taken our model into other areas. So we do have accountants
Right.
and management consultants and different professionals. So we think we have about a division with about 40 or 45 non-legal people in there. For instance, we focus on some key areas. We've developed a sports practice. It's led by an ex-chief exec of a football club who's an accountant, developing a sports practice which works across the legal and the non-legal. We do the same in crypto. Crypto, we're probably the leading practice in Europe. I'd have thought now in the crypto area that goes between the kind of legal and non-legal. So it does allow us to bring people to work together to get a better service to clients. So I definitely see that's a good way of operating. We're keen, our focus has always been and probably will always be the law, but actually where they can work together, we're really keen to help them to do that.
Yeah, it makes lots of sense. Having got the scars on my back of having built my own franchise business, I had an HR business which I franchised nationally, and I know I went up a very steep learning curve as I went through the launch phase of that. What were the things you've learned and the things you perhaps do differently had you had your time again?
Oh, I've had the time again. Oh, I tell you, having time again. I think, well, one of the things I did wrong, and I think it's what you talk about is scars. I think we were going into something that was very different. And I remember talking to journalists very early on, and they didn't get it, and they went out and kind of talked to us about us being a virtual law firm, which always sounded a little bit toy townish to me, and I didn't quite get it. But it did put me off talking to journalists, and it did put me off for marketing heavily in those early days.
Right.
Is that a bad thing? It may not have been a bad thing. We came away and got our head down and developed it. But I think we could have been a lot more confident in getting our message out. I think that's left a scar where we're still not as confident in some ways in getting our message out. No one likes criticism, and I think it was easy to criticize because we were doing something different. I don't actually see that now. I think competing firms are very complimentary about what we do, and I don't see that. But it did certainly leave us a bit of a scar, yeah, in the early days.
Looking forward at the wider legal industry as it faces into AI, as it faces into talent shortages and all the things that we know about. But what view do you have for the industry?
It is interesting. I mean, I think I don't worry so much about. I think AI will sort itself out, and I think what we're doing. There's now something like about 80 firms like us now doing what we do. I think that is a really good thing in the market. I think I probably worry for the law as a whole, and I think it's the way society is going to an extent is becoming less democratic and more dictatorial in what it's doing. And I think the rule of law is a really, really important protection that we have in our society. And that worries me that politicians may look to try and overrule the rule of law as they want to take more control of things, and we go down that route. And I think the Law Society, the SRA, everybody needs to stand up and say, look, the rule of law, and journalists as well, the rule of law makes what we do accountable, and it's really, really important. So I think we should, as a nation, be supporting that rule of law as much as we possibly can.
I totally agree. It's been lovely speaking with you. And for our audience, if they want to know more, where can they find you?
That's a kind offer. Thank you. Well, it's Darryl Cooke at Gunnercooke.com. And I'd be delighted to talk to anyone, actually, anyone who may want to join, anyone who just may want to know more about the organization. I'd be delighted to engage with them.
It's been fascinating listening to you. Thank you. And that's it for this edition of the Coaching Conversation. We'll see you next time. So there you have it, the latest edition of the Coaching Conversation. Hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it useful, and I hope it did what it set out to do. As promised at the beginning of the programme, here is a special offer for you, our loyal audience. If you reach out to me at gwiley@sagegreen.com and mention this podcast, we'll make available to you a coaching programme for you and or your team at a 50% discount. So where can you reach us? So it's definitely gwiley@sagegreen.com. You can also reach us at the Executive Mindset at sagegreen.com, and our website is clearly theexecutivemindset.co.uk. If you enjoyed this, do please leave us with a wonderful rating on Google. We'd really appreciate that. So nothing more for me to say now other than see you again soon.